Welcome to the Shepherd Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. This is an opportunity for me to introduce you to some people I think you might like to know at Shepherd of the Hills and to get to know some people better. And today I'm honored to have as my guest Ron Cottrell. Ron, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, sir.
Yes, and better known as Sergeant Ron.
Sergeant Ron to the children, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they all call me Sergeant Ron and wave at me whenever they see me. So.
Isn't that a nice feeling?
It is. It's a very nice feeling.
Yeah. I know it makes my day whenever the kids say my name and wave to me, and they have a lot of power that way.
They do, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you're our Director of Campus Safety here at Shepherd of the Hills. You've been on staff here for how long now?
I came on in July, so I'm fairly new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit more about what the Director of Campus Safety does at Shepherd.
Well, it's actually a number of things that I do. I am in charge of safety for the children, for the staff, for the campus. That's our primary goal. All of us who work here in the safety department are retired police officers. So we've all got extensive careers behind us, and this is kind of a new chapter for us. Mm-hmm. I do all the COVID-19 rules and regulations, and we do safety checks to make sure everybody's wearing their masks and stay 6 feet apart and et cetera there. We do we provide a presence for the drop-off and the pickup of children every day. Mm-hmm. So there's always a safety officer over there, and just to make sure everything goes smoothly, and to greet people as they come in. You know, in the mornings we greet everyone that comes in with a smile under the mask and a brisk good morning or something to that effect. And it's funny, some of the kids have gotten to the point now where they don't even wait until they get over by me. I see them over by the cars, and they'll get out of the car and they're just waving their little heart out, trying to get my attention. So I think that's pretty cool. I mean, like you said, it makes you feel good.
Really?
Yeah. And then there's a lot of other things, little things like key control and other safety things. We do patrol the campus inside and outside, looking for safety violations, which would be doors that aren't secure, doors aren't locked. Things like that. We look for safety violations, things on the floor, spills, anything where it could cause hazard to the children or the staff, things like that. So it keeps us pretty busy all day long. Yeah,
there's a lot of activity on our campus, so a lot to keep up with.
There is.
I'm really glad we have this position too. We haven't always had a Director of Campus Safety. It's been within the past couple of years. Sergeant Bob was the one who sort of pioneered that position for us, and has handed off the baton to you. But with the construction going on, with the parking lot not being at full use right now, with COVID, and we've got a lot of reasons why this position is very important right now, I feel.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. I'm glad you are here. So let's get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell us? You mentioned you were retired police officer. Let's go back even before that. Where are you from originally? Tell us about your upbringing.
I am from a little town in northern Ohio, not too far from Lake Erie.
Okay.
For those of you old enough to remember Andy Griffith, when I first met my wife, it was funny. I used to tell her I'm from Mayberry because it was a very small town. We had one stoplight in the center of town. Everybody knew everybody else's name and pretty much everybody else's business. It was just a quaint little town. And it's funny because my brother had taken some of our old videos from kids growing up. We had one of those little movie cameras, and you had to wind it up, and then it would go for like 30 seconds or 45 seconds and take video. Well, he found a lot of those, and he put them to a DVD. And then the first thing my wife said when she saw the DVD is, "Oh my gosh, you were born in Mayberry." It's like, yeah.
For real? Yeah.
It was a very small town. Like I said, everybody knew everybody else. I was in the band growing up in high school there, and then from there I went, and my parents are now in heaven. I still have a brother, lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. We talk about every other day or so. He is a professor of education and physical education. He's retired from 2 different universities, so he was also the president of the American Association of Health Educators. So he's the intelligent one in the family, Dr. Cottrell, and then there's me, see?
I think you're pretty intelligent too, just in a different field.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Now tell us about some of the jobs that you've had prior to being here, because you haven't done just one thing, you've done a variety of things from what I remember.
I have done several things, right? Before here, I was with the San Antonio Park Police, 28 and a half years. I just retired in March. Prior to that, I was in United States Army Military Police for 6 years. I was in Korea and several different states, and got out of there as a sergeant. And as the Park Police, I've been a sergeant for the last 18 and a half years. The first line supervisor, if you will, for doing that. And that's about it. I had a company for about 5 years where I taught firearms. I taught how to shoot. I taught learned to the DPS class for concealed carry. I taught some tactical classes. When I was in the Park Police, I was the training academy commander for 17 years. And I was the senior firearms instructor. So I had like 5 or 6 instructors that worked for me. We did all the firearms instruction, from very basic police firearms to very complex and tactical shooting, and which is one of my passions. I love to shoot, and my wife and I to this day still go to the range, and although we go to the inside range because we like the air conditioning, but
yes.
But yeah, we still go and shoot just for fun, just for get out of the house, and then you don't have to worry too much about spacing 6 feet because you each have a lane that you're on. But yeah, it's fun. We enjoy that.
How's your accuracy? Are you at the top of your game?
I was probably one of the top shooters in the city. I was one of the top shooters in the military. We had military games that they put on, and I beat out 250 other military policemen as far as shooting. So I pretty much hit what I aim at, but it's been a long time, many years of practice and practice and practice to get to that point. But yeah, my wife's a pretty good shot, so I make sure I never cross her because she can put them down range about almost as good as I can.
Okay, all right. You guys are a good match for each other.
We are.
Yeah, and I want to hear a little more about your wife later. I want to first dig in a little bit more to the idea of law enforcement. And I was talking to you this morning as we were thinking ahead to our conversation now. In my neighborhood and in a lot of neighborhoods, there's these signs up that says, "This house backs the blue." And right now, law enforcement, you wouldn't have to put a sign up like that unless there was some sort of issue you're making a statement about. So people are making statements about law enforcement. Just first of all, what caused you to go into law enforcement, and what kept you in it? Because I believe it would be at times a very demanding and stressful field.
It is.
So what's the story there with you?
I always wanted to be a cop growing up. I watched the TV shows, the Adam 12s and the other old TV shows about policemen, and I always thought, when I grow up, that's what I want to do. I want to be a policeman, and I want to be there, and I want to help people, and I want to be there for people when they're in stress and stuff. And then you get into police work, and like any other profession, it's probably not exactly what you expected, but there's a lot of good the police officers do. I mean, I hear it every day about bad police officers and things like that. I can only speak for my agency, but in my agency, I had very dedicated officers. I was the last few years, I was in charge of the bike unit, which is a very specialized unit, and they're all hand-picked. And, my guys would never do the things that they're accused officers of nationwide. They were very honorable, they were very professional. In fact, I can only think, I did for about 5 years, I worked internal affairs. So all the complaints on any of our officers came through my desk. And there really wasn't that many, what I would call a bad. Some of them just made unfortunate choices. Minor, I'd say a minor choice, but a choice that had repercussions.
Right.
And there was a few that obviously weren't meant to be police officers, and through attrition and through the complaint system, we did get rid of a few officers that we probably needed to. Okay. But all in all, I can tell you that the police officers I know, and SAPD has 3,500 officers, and we have 180, and I worked a lot with SAPD. I just don't see it. I've never seen that kind of really bad officer. Yeah, I'm sure they exist, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some that get arrested and some that, just in my tenure, I really haven't seen anything that I would consider a really bad apple, somebody that's just out to do bad things. Right.
And you hear on the news about those rare cases. Those are the ones that make the headlines. I mean, the police officers that I know, and we have law enforcement, several members of our congregation who that's their field, wonderful people, high integrity. My dad volunteers at the police department in the town where he lives. And so,
really?
Yeah, just big supporters of law enforcement. How does it feel for you as someone in law enforcement when, that one guy who does a bad thing makes a bad name for everybody in the field? How does that feel?
That's kind of the way it is. When that happens, it kind of makes you sad, because the general public will take that and run with it as if everybody is that way. And like I said, don't get me wrong, I know there are some bad people in law enforcement. I just haven't dealt with any that are quote unquote, do those kind of things, And there's also stuff right now where law enforcement's not being given its due, basically. When an arrest is made, it needs to go through the courts and all before it becomes public knowledge. That's basically not only to protect the officer, but also to protect the victim of whatever crime it happens to be. Well, nowadays, whenever something happens, a shooting or something, the media demands immediate viewing of the cameras that the officers wear. Yeah. Well, that's actually evidence. Should there have been something wrong, that's evidence. And to bring evidence out into the public eye before it goes through the court system, in my opinion, is just incorrect. It needs to go through the proper channels. Sure. And I'm not saying we should never show it, but let it go through the legal channels first, and do the investigation and such. And then you can bring it out and show it to the general public after it's adjudicated through the system.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, don't short circuit the system and the processes we have to do things the right way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Going back to one thing you said for a while you were receiving all the complaints.
Right.
How did that feel to be receiving a lot of complaints? After a while, do you think, oh boy, here's another complaint?
It's kind of the way it is. Nobody really wants that job. Yeah. You're assigned that job.
Right.
The chief called me in and asked me, where do I want to go? And I said, I'd like to go to the bike unit. And he says, you're not going to the bike unit, you're going to internal affairs. It's like, oh, thank you, sir.
That's right.
Yeah, he had kind of a strange sense of humor. Nice guy, real strange sense of humor.
Yeah.
So for 5 years, every complaint that came through about every officer on our agency came through my desk, and we investigate every one. There are some that are pretty obvious. The cameras on the officers have saved more officers than they've ever convicted, if you will. Because people will call in and they will say, well, this officer cursed at me and called me names. Really? Well, let's just look at the camera, because the camera was on while you were, and then they start backing off and thinking, uh-oh, I just said something that's not true because I'm going to watch the camera as soon as we get done with this conversation.
Yeah.
I can pull it up on the computer and watch that particular video. And the officer's yes, sir, and no, sir. And, even though the violator gets a little bit irate, the officer still maintained control, which is what they're taught to do. And nothing was done. Well, those kind, as soon as you watch the video, well, that investigation's done. So those were pretty easy. And you'd be surprised how many people try to do that. They're just mad because they have a ticket and they try to get the officer in trouble that he did this or she did that or whatever. It happens probably more than you think. Those come through. And then there's some where the officer may have made a legitimate decision at the time. You have to understand when officers are in especially serious incidents, they have split seconds to make a decision. It's not like, well, should I pull my gun or should I not pull my gun? You have about that long to figure that out. And they're human. That's kind of a surprise to some people that police officers are real people and they're real human. And they do make mistakes. They may have drawn the gun because at the instant it happened, they believed that they needed to.
Right.
And then find out that they don't need to, and maybe they holstered it or whatever the case may be. And that's the kind of thing that goes all the way up. It goes all the way up to Chief McManus. But once the investigation's done, the investigation itself will go to our captain, which is the head of our agency, and it will go on up to Chief McManus to make a decision whether that officer in that instant made a right decision or a wrong decision.
Does every officer wear a camera?
Every officer wears a camera.
Where's the camera?
The camera is right here on their chest.
Okay.
You will see it. It looks like if you're old enough to remember a pager, it kind of looks like a pager. It's a black box about this big a square, and it's usually sitting here or here. And as soon as they get a call, before they ever arrive at the call, they have to turn the camera on.
They have to manually turn it on?
They have to manually turn it on.
Okay, and if they forget?
Then they're probably going to get a couple of days without pay because that's a real serious infraction.
Okay.
Now, there is a thing where if I walk into a store and there's a man robbing it with a gun and I have to draw my weapon, well, I didn't have time. So we take that under consideration.
Sure.
It was, you have to draw the weapon and defend yourself right away.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. We don't expect you to stop when there's bullets flying and turn on your camera, but there is a reasonable expectation as soon as the danger's over, you turn it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have to make a lot of decisions in your work. As cases are coming to you, you're sort of in a judge position where you're having to decide the merit of a certain case, right?
Basically, I wasn't a judge. Basically, I was a finder of facts. I was an investigator.
Okay.
So I investigate the case, whichever way it may lead, and then I put my findings in a final report and send them to the captain.
Okay. And
the captain will read it and he will decide, yes, we need to proceed with this, or you've done enough and we understand that this didn't happen, or, and he can also say, we're just going to give the guy a counseling statement, or we're going to give the guy a letter of reprimand. Once it goes above a letter of reprimand, once it goes above a letter of reprimand, then it goes to Chief McManus for a 1 day, a 3 day, a 5 day, or whatever, how many suspension days.
I see. Okay. As we're talking, it makes me just think about how people react in different situations, how people behave. We're human, we make mistakes, all those kinds of things. What has your work in law enforcement taught you about human nature and human behavior?
The biggest thing I think I've learned is that it's not about, nowadays it's all about race, creed, color, things like that. It's not. It's about individuals. There are good individuals of every color, race, creed, and there are bad individuals. And it's an individual thing. I hear a lot about, Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, the things like that. And this is just my opinion, is being in law enforcement for almost 40 years. Okay, it's not about that. It's about the individual. There are simply bad people in the world, and there are extremely good people in the world. Irrelevant of the color of their skin, irrelevant of their background or anything, where they're from. It's just an individual thing. And you have to treat every person as an individual. not as a white person, a black person, an Asian person. You treat them as a human being. And once they prove to you that they're the bad people, then our office gets the call and we go into action if we need to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One thing I picked up on as we're talking, you're referring to that work in present tense.
Yeah, well, I haven't been out of the job that long, so yeah, you're probably right. I probably still do.
Yeah, I think it stays with you. It's a part of your mind. I mean, you've been doing this for about 40 years, you said, so it
almost, yeah,
stays in that mindset.
And they say once you're a cop, you're always a cop. It's kind of like even if you retire, you still think like a cop.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't really kind of turn it off.
Right. So let's think about your work that you do here compared to some things you used to do. This would be more low key. Important job. You have to be aware and attentive in those things, but probably not the likelihood of danger or some of those situations you were dealing with before. What made this particular position at Shepherd the Hills appealing to you?
I was excited to come to work for a religious organization. I had never worked for a church or a school or anything like that, and I consider myself a very religious person, and it's kind of feels good to be around other people who are religious, other people who are believers and things like that. So that's one of the reasons I really like this. I like the idea of working around children. I like to be around kids and children, and just every day it's great. Like you said, when they talk to me or I'll walk by the playground and one of them will yell, "Hey, Sergeant Ron, how are you?" And they wave at me, and it's just a really good feeling, and I enjoy all the people here. Yeah. I don't know how to exactly say it, but the people that work here are different than the people I've worked around in the past. In the law enforcement, your sergeants and lieutenants and captains and things like that. People here are friendly, they're down to earth, they're helpful, and I really enjoy that.
Good.
I do.
I'm glad. Well, you fit right in because those are qualities that I find are true of you as well.
Well, thank you.
Yes. You talked about being a religious person. Can you tell us a little bit about your faith and how your faith has helped you in your career and in your life?
Yeah, I was born and raised a Methodist, and went to church every Sunday as a kid. I remember my father nodding off to sleep and my mother elbowing him in the ribs is one of the earliest memories I have of being in church.
That happens in church?
It's hard to believe, but I understand that that's probably happened before. And he was hard. He worked 2 jobs, and the man worked from 4 o'clock in the morning till like 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. He was tired, and Sunday was his only day off. And but it used to make my mother so mad when he would nod off, and I swear he probably had bruises on his ribs where she would wake him up during the service. It's probably not something I should be telling you, but it wasn't me sleeping, it was him, so
that's okay.
And my faith has kind of kept me on the straight and narrow most of my life. I should say all my life. It's kind of like being in law enforcement. There's a right way and a wrong way, and there's a truth, and you have to pursue that. So.
All right. We talked about family a little bit in the sense your wife is also a good aim. Can you tell me a little more about your family? Who's in your family?
Sure. Like I said, my mother and father have already passed. My brother, who's 7 years older than me, and I don't let him forget that ever. He is I already said he's a professor.
Yeah, he's the academic.
Right. I have 2 daughters, a 29-year-old and a 40-year-old who just turned 40. My younger daughter works for the park police. She's a service agent, which is like a secretary type thing, and she works night shift overnight. And she just finished her second associate degree. She has one in math, and then she has another one in surgical technology. So she's going to be a surgical nurse, basically. She's about to take her state exam, and once she takes that, she will probably move to her chosen profession. My other daughter's in the military. She's a DoD civilian. She spent 16 years in the Air Force, and then one day she got out of the Air Force, and she's still in the same office she was in same chair, same desk, only now she's in civilian clothes instead of military uniform.
Oh, okay.
I've got 2 grandchildren. Got a 16-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old daughter who just graduated. My 16-year-old is here in San Antonio and lives with her mom. And my 18-year-old is in Phoenix and lives with her father. So we unfortunately don't get to see her very much anymore, but we talk on the phone and we FaceTime and all that kind of fun stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much, I'm a family man, that's kind of what I do. I like being at home with the kids and being at home with the grandkids and the wife. And the wife and I spend a lot of quality time together, either if it's watching Netflix or we like to go out and do things like the sales, the garage sales and the yard sales.
Yeah.
We call it going sailing.
Sailing. That's great.
So we'll get up on Saturday morning or a Sunday morning and we'll go out and find yard sales just for the fun of it. You never know what you're going to find.
Yeah.
But it's fun. We enjoy our time together.
Yeah, wonderful. Family is such a blessing.
It is, and I've been married now for 23 years, and I've been with my wife for 25 years. So I think she still likes me. I'm kind of hoping so.
That is good. That's a good thing.
Right?
You like to watch Netflix. What kind of things do you like to watch?
We like watching. Let's see. Right now we're doing. What are we doing? There's several law enforcement types like NCIS and things like that we watch. Mm-hmm. We've watched several things all the way from the first episode to the last. But it varies what we like to watch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. Well, Sergeant Ron, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and thank you for all that you do to keep our kids and everybody safe on our campus.
Likewise, sir. I've enjoyed the time we've spent together.
Thank you. And thank you so much for watching this episode of the Shepherd Podcast. Look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, please keep yourself healthy. The Lord's blessings to you today.